No alien would show mercy in a deadly duel, but the human left everyone stunned. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic War Council was a sight to behold. Towering walls of polished obsidian stretched upwards, adorned with the emblems and insignias of countless star systems. The air hummed with the energy of advanced technology and the murmur of 100 different languages. In the center of the room, a massive holographic display cast an ethereal glow over the gathered representatives, each one a testament to the diversity and power of the galactic community. Among them stood Captain Elias Riker, the sole human in attendance. He cut an impressive figure in his crisp navy blue uniform, his chiseled features and piercing green eyes a stark contrast to the varied alien physiology surrounding him. Riker's presence alone was a testament to Earth's growing influence and the begrudging respect the galactic community had begun to show his kind. As the council members took their seats, a hush fell over the room. The Korgon Emperor, a towering figure with deep blue skin and piercing yellow eyes, rose to address the assembly. His ornate golden armor glinted under the chamber's lights, a symbol of his power and authority. "We have convened today to settle a matter of grave importance," he declared, his voice resonating through the chamber like distant thunder. "The Korgon Empire has long been the dominant force in this galaxy, and we will not tolerate any challenges to our supremacy." His gaze settled on Captain Riker, a sneer forming on his thin lips. "The humans have grown too bold, too quickly. They must be reminded of their place in the galactic hierarchy." Riker met the Emperor's stare unflinchingly, his jaw set in determination. He knew the Korgon's reputation for ruthlessness and cruelty, but he refused to be intimidated. Earth had earned its seat at this table through the bravery and ingenuity of its people, and he would not allow their hard-fought progress to be undermined. "With all due respect, Your Majesty," Riker said, his voice calm and even, "humanity has proven itself worthy of a place among the great powers of the galaxy. We have forged alliances, established thriving colonies, and contributed to the betterment of all species. We seek not to challenge Korgon supremacy, but to work alongside you as equals." The Emperor let out a harsh barking laugh. "Equals? You overestimate your position, human. The Korgon Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds and subjugated countless species. What makes you believe you are any different?" Riker's eyes narrowed, a hint of steel in his voice. "We are different because we do not seek to conquer or subjugate. We believe in the power of cooperation and mutual respect. It is through unity, not dominance, that true strength is found." The Emperor's face contorted in anger, his fists clenching at his sides. "You dare lecture me on strength, on power? You know nothing of what it takes to maintain order in this chaotic universe." He paused, taking a moment to compose himself before continuing. "To settle this matter once and for all, I propose a challenge. A duel to the death between the finest warrior of the Korgon Empire and a champion of Earth's choosing. Should the human prevail, we will recognize Earth as an equal member of this council. But should our champion emerge victorious, humanity will submit to Korgon rule and surrender their colonies across the galaxy." A murmur of shock and excitement rippled through the gathered representatives. Such a challenge was unprecedented in the history of the council, and the stakes could not be higher. Captain Riker rose to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the risks, the weight of responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. But he also knew that backing down was not an option. The future of humanity depended on this moment, on his courage and resolve. "I accept your challenge on behalf of Earth and all of humanity," he declared, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "And I will fight as our champion." The chamber erupted into chaos as the council members reacted to Riker's bold declaration. Some shouted their support for the human captain, praising his bravery and determination. Others jeered and laughed, convinced that no mere human could stand against the might of the Korgon Empire. The Korgon Emperor merely smiled, a cruel, predatory grin that sent a chill down Riker's spine. "Very well, human," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You will face Korgoth, the mightiest warrior of the Korgon Empire. Prepare yourself, for in 3 days' time, you will meet your doom in the arena." With that, the council adjourned, leaving Captain Riker to contemplate the monumental task that lay ahead. He knew that the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, and he would not let his people down. No matter the cost, he would emerge victorious and show the galaxy the true strength and spirit of Earth. As he exited the chamber, Riker's mind raced with possibilities. He would need every advantage he could get if he hoped to stand a chance against Korgath. The Korgan warrior was legendary, a ruthless and undefeated champion who had slain countless opponents in the arena. But Riker had a few tricks up his sleeve. He had studied the Korgans' fighting techniques, their weaknesses, and their culture. He knew that their pride and arrogance could be their undoing, and he intended to exploit that to the fullest. First, however, he needed to train, to hone his skills and sharpen his mind for the battle to come. And he knew just the person to help him do that. As he strode through the bustling streets of the Council's host city, Riker's thoughts turned to his old friend and mentor, a grizzled veteran of a dozen wars who had taught him everything he knew about combat. If anyone could prepare him for this fight, it was Sergeant John Mad Dog McGinnis. Riker smiled to himself, a glint of determination in his eye. The Korgans may have underestimated humanity, but they were about to learn the true meaning of human resilience and courage. And when the dust settled, the galaxy would never be the same. Captain Elias Riker navigated the winding streets of the sprawling metropolis, his mind focused on the daunting task ahead. The city, a hub of galactic commerce and diplomacy, was a melting pot of alien cultures and technologies. Towering skyscrapers of gleaming metal and glass stood alongside ancient stone temples, while hovering vehicles and sleek starships crisscrossed the skies above. Riker's destination lay on the outskirts of the city, in a nondescript warehouse district seldom frequented by the well-heeled diplomats and dignitaries. It was here among the gritty, hardscrabble streets that he would find the man who could help him prepare for his impending duel with Korgath. As he approached the weathered, rusted door of a particularly dilapidated warehouse, Riker couldn't help but smile. The building may have looked abandoned, but he knew better. With a firm knock, he waited, listening for the telltale signs of movement within. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing a grizzled, battle-scarred human in his late 60s. Sergeant John Mad Dog McGinnis stood before him, a wry grin on his face and a glint of mischief in his steel-gray eyes. Well, if it isn't Captain Elias Riker," McGinnis drawled, his voice rough and gravelly from years of barking orders on the battlefield. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit?" Riker clasped the older man's hand in a firm handshake, a gesture of respect and camaraderie. "I need your help, Sarge," he said, his tone grave. "I've gotten myself into a bit of a situation." McGinnis raised an eyebrow, his grin widening. "A situation, you say? And here I thought you were just dropping by for a friendly chat and a cup of coffee?" Riker chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm afraid it's a bit more serious than that. I've been challenged to a duel by the Korgan Emperor. A fight to the death against their greatest warrior." The sergeant's expression sobered, his eyes narrowing. "The Korgans? Those blue-skinned bastards are no joke, Riker. Their warriors are some of the toughest, meanest sons of bitches in the galaxy." "I know," Riker said, his jaw clenching. "That's why I need your help. You fought them before, studied their techniques. If anyone can prepare me for this fight, it's you." McGinnis nodded, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Damn right I can, but it won't be easy. You'll have to push yourself harder than you ever have before. Are you ready for that?" Riker met his mentor's gaze, determination etched into every line of his face. "I'm ready, Sarge. I have to be. The fate of humanity rests on this duel." "Then let's get to work," McGinnis said, stepping aside to let Riker enter the warehouse. "We've got a lot of ground to cover and not much time to do it." As Riker stepped inside, he found himself in a vast open space filled with an array of training equipment and weapons. Targets, obstacle courses, and sparring mats stretched out before him, a testament to McGinnis's dedication to the art of combat. Over the next several hours, the two men worked tirelessly, honing Riker's skills and studying the weaknesses of the Korgan warrior caste. McGinnis drilled him relentlessly, pushing him to his limits and beyond. They practiced the art of the Korgan battle axe, a fearsome weapon known for its ability to cleave through even the toughest armor. Riker learned to anticipate the wide, sweeping strikes of the axe, to dodge and weave and strike back with lightning-fast precision. They sparred hand to hand, McGinnis teaching Riker the pressure points and vulnerable spots in Korgan physiology. He learned to use his smaller size and greater agility to his advantage, to strike hard and fast and never let up. As the training wore on, Riker could feel himself growing stronger, faster, more confident. But he knew that even with all his preparation, the duel would be a close thing. Korgath was a formidable opponent, and the Korgans were not known for their mercy. During a brief respite, as they sat catching their breath and nursing their bruises, McGinnis fixed Riker with a serious look. "There's one more thing you need to know about the Korgans," he said, his voice low and intense. "They have a saying, victory is life. They believe that to show mercy is to show weakness. If you hesitate, even for a moment, Korgath will not hesitate to strike you down." Riker nodded, and his brow furrowed in thought. "I understand, Sarge, but I can't let that change who I am. I fight for humanity, for our values and our way of life. If I abandon those principles, even in the face of death, then what am I fighting for?" McGinnis smiled, a touch of pride in his eyes. "Spoken like a true leader, Riker. Just remember, when you're in that arena, you do whatever it takes to come out alive. The galaxy needs men like you, now more than ever." With those words ringing in his ears, Riker redoubled his efforts, pushing himself harder and harder as the day of the duel drew near. He knew that the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, and he would not let them down. As the sun set on the final day of training, Riker and McGinnis stood side by side, looking out over the city. The weight of the coming battle hung heavy in the air, but there was a sense of hope too, a belief in the strength and resilience of the human spirit. "You're ready," McGinnis said, clapping Riker on the shoulder. "Give them hell out there, Captain. Show them what humanity is made of." Riker nodded, a fierce determination burning in his eyes. "I will, Sarge. For Earth, for humanity, and for the future we're fighting for." With a final handshake, the two men parted ways, each knowing that the fate of their species would be decided in the arena. But as Riker made his way back to his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that, no matter the outcome, this duel would change the course of history forever. The arena was a colossal structure, a marvel of alien engineering that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. Its towering walls of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields rose hundreds of feet into the air, enclosing a vast, circular battlefield that had seen countless duels and battles over the centuries. As Captain Elias Riker stepped into the arena floor, he felt a rush of adrenaline and anticipation coursing through his veins. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a cacophony of alien voices and strange, otherworldly sounds that seemed to shake the very foundations of the arena. Across the battlefield, Korgath stood waiting, a towering figure of rippling muscle and cold, merciless eyes. The Korgan warrior was clad in heavy, black armor that seemed to absorb the light around him, and in his hands he held a massive battle axe that crackled with energy. Riker took a deep breath, steadying himself as he unsheathed his own weapon, a sleek, curved blade of alien metal that had been a gift from Sergeant McGinnis. The sword felt light and balanced in his hands, an extension of his own body and will. As the two warriors faced each other, the Korgan Emperor's voice boomed out over the arena, amplified by hidden speakers. "Let the duel begin," he declared, his voice dripping with malice and anticipation. Korgath wasted no time, charging forward with a roar that shook the arena. His battle axe swung in a wide, deadly arc, aimed at Riker's head. But the human was ready, ducking and weaving out of the way with lightning-fast reflexes. The two warriors clashed in a flurry of blows, their weapons ringing out with each impact. Riker could feel the sheer power behind Korgath's swings, the Korgan's strength far beyond that of any human. But he had trained for this, had honed his skills and his mind to a razor's edge. He danced around Korgath's attacks, striking back with quick, precise thrusts and slashes. The Korgan's armor was tough, but not impenetrable, and Riker knew that he had to find a weakness, a chink in the warrior's defenses. As the duel wore on, Riker could feel himself tiring, his muscles burning with exertion. But he pushed through the pain, drawing on reserves of strength and determination that he never knew he possessed. Korgath, too, seemed to be feeling the effects of the prolonged battle. His swings grew wilder, more erratic, and Riker saw his chance. With a quick feint to the left, he drew the Korgan's guard away, then struck like a viper, his blade finding a gap in the warrior's armor and sinking deep into his flesh. Korgath roared in pain and rage, his eyes blazing with hatred. But Riker pressed his advantage, raining down blows on the wounded Korgan with relentless fury. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the human, against all odds, drove the mighty Korgath back, step by step. And then in a moment that would be remembered for generations to come, Riker saw his opening. Korgath, his strength failing, his armor shattered, stumbled and fell to one knee. The human stood over him, his blade poised for the killing blow. The arena held its breath, waiting for the final strike that would end the duel and secure humanity's place among the great powers of the galaxy. But as Riker looked down at his fallen foe, he hesitated. In that moment, he saw not a ruthless, merciless warrior, but a being like himself, a soldier fighting for his people and his way of life. He saw the fear and the desperation in Korgath's eyes, and he knew that he could not strike the final blow. Slowly, deliberately, Riker lowered his sword. The crowd gasped in shock and disbelief as the human extended his hand to the fallen Korgan, offering him mercy and compassion in the face of certain death. For a long, tense moment, Korgath stared at Riker's outstretched hand, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he reached out and grasped it, allowing the human to help him to his feet. The arena erupted in chaos, the crowd's shock giving way to a roar of confusion and outrage. The Korgan Emperor himself leapt to his feet, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. But Riker stood tall and proud, his voice ringing out over the tumult. "I fight for humanity," he declared, his words echoing through the arena. "But I also fight for the values that make us human: compassion, mercy, and the belief that all life is precious. If we abandon those principles, even in the face of death, then we lose sight of who we are and what we stand for." Korgath, still standing at Riker's side, looked at the human with a new understanding and respect. In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of their shared humanity, despite the vast differences that separated their species. As the Korgan Emperor sputtered and raged, demanding that the duel be declared null and void, Korgath stepped forward. "I have been defeated in fair combat," he declared, his voice strong and clear. "By the laws of our people, I owe Captain Riker a debt of honor. From this day forward, I pledge myself to his service, to fight alongside him as his loyal companion and friend." The arena fell silent, stunned by this unprecedented turn of events. Never before had a Korgan warrior pledged himself to an outsider, let alone a human. But Korgath's words carried the weight of ancient tradition and unbreakable oath. Riker, too, was taken aback by the Korgan's declaration. But as he looked into Korgath's eyes, he saw the sincerity and the determination there. With a nod of acceptance, he clasped the warrior's arm in a gesture of friendship and alliance. As the two warriors stood side by side, the Korgan Emperor's fury gave way to a grudging respect. "Very well," he said, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "The human has proven himself worthy of our respect. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that humanity has earned its place among the great powers, and that the Korgan Empire will honor the debt owed by one of its own." With those words, the duel was ended, and a new chapter in galactic history had begun. Riker and Korgath, once bitter enemies, now stood as allies and friends, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they left the arena, side by side, Riker couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and possibility. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but with Korgath at his side, he knew that anything was possible. Together, they would forge a new path for their peoples, one based on understanding, respect, and the unbreakable bonds of friendship. The hangar bay of the Galactic War Council's headquarters buzzed with activity as Captain Elias Riker and Korgath prepared for their first mission together. Technicians and mechanics scurried about, making final checks on the sleek, silver starship that would carry the unlikely duo into the depths of space. Riker stood at the base of the boarding ramp, his eyes scanning the pre-flight checklist on his datapad. He looked up as Korgath approached, the Korgan warrior's heavy footsteps echoing across the metal deck. "Ready to go, big guy?" Riker asked, a grin spreading across his face. Korgath nodded, his expression serious. "I am prepared, Captain, but I must admit I am still unsure of my place in this partnership." Riker clapped a hand on the Korgan's shoulder, his eyes meeting Korgath's gaze. "We're in this together, Korgath. We may come from different worlds, but we're brothers now. We've got each other's backs, no matter what." Korgath's brow furrowed, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "I am not accustomed to such familiarity, Captain. Among my people, rank and hierarchy are everything." "Well, you're not among your people anymore," Riker chuckled. "You're with me, and on my ship, we do things a little differently. We're a team, Korgath. Equals." The Korgan warrior considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I will try to adapt, Captain, but it may take some time." "Take all the time you need," Riker said, his tone reassuring. "I'm not going anywhere." As they boarded the ship and settled into the cockpit, Riker couldn't help but marvel at the advanced technology that surrounded them. The Korgan Empire was known for its cutting-edge spacecraft, and this one was no exception. "Impressive, isn't it?" Korgath said. noting Riker's appreciation. "The Korgon fleet is the envy of the galaxy." Riker grinned, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "Well, let's see what this baby can do." With a roar of engines and a burst of blue plasma, the starship lifted off, soaring out of the hangar bay and into the vast expanse of space. As they navigated through asteroid fields and past glittering nebulae, Riker and Korgath fell into an easy rhythm, their unique skills complementing each other perfectly. Riker's quick thinking and creative problem-solving paired well with Korgath's tactical expertise and raw strength. During a particularly tense moment, as they dodged and weaved through a barrage of enemy fire, Riker couldn't resist a bit of playful banter. "Hey, Korgath!" he called out over the sound of explosions. "Bet you never thought you'd be flying with a human, huh?" Korgath grunted, his eyes focused on the targeting screen. "I never thought I would be flying with anyone, Captain. Korgan warriors are trained to work alone." "Well, that sounds lonely," Riker said, his voice softening. "Everyone needs a friend, Korgath, even tough guys like you." The Korgan warrior was silent for a moment, then replied, "Perhaps you are right, Captain. This partnership is not unpleasant." Riker grinned, taking the comment as high praise from the stoic Korgan. As they completed their mission and returned to base, Riker couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. They had worked seamlessly together, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they faced. In the days that followed, as they embarked on increasingly dangerous assignments, Riker and Korgath continued to learn from and support each other. During a rare moment of downtime, as they sat in the ship's mess hall, Riker decided to probe a bit deeper into Korgath's past. "So what's your story, Korgath?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "How did you become the Korgan Empire's greatest warrior?" Korgath stared into his cup of nutrient paste, his expression pensive. "It is a long tale, Captain, one of blood and battle, of triumph and loss." Riker nodded, his eyes encouraging. "I've got time." And so Korgath began to share his history, of his training from a young age in the art of war, of the countless campaigns he had waged across the stars. He spoke of the comrades he had lost, the enemies he had vanquished, and the weight of duty that had driven him ever forward. As Riker listened, he found himself marveling at the Korgon warrior's resilience and strength of character. Despite the harshness of his upbringing and the brutality of his past, Korgath possessed a deep sense of honor and loyalty that Riker couldn't help but admire. "You know," Riker said, when Korgath had finished his tale, "you and I aren't so different, really. We both fight for what we believe in, for the people we care about." Korgath considered this, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right, Captain. Though our methods may differ, our goals are not dissimilar." Riker grinned, interested, raising his cup in a toast. "To brothers in arms, then. May we always have each other's backs." Korgath hesitated for a moment, then raised his own cup, a hint of a smile on his lips. "To brothers in arms." As they clinked their cups together, Riker felt a warmth spreading through his chest. He knew that the road ahead would be long and perilous, that they would face challenges and dangers beyond anything they had ever known. But with Korgath at his side, he felt ready for anything. Together they would face whatever the galaxy threw at them, united by the bonds of friendship and the power of compassion. And as they set out on their next mission, Riker couldn't help but grin at the thought of the adventures that lay ahead. With a Korgon warrior as his brother and a starship at his command, the possibilities were endless. "Ready to save the galaxy, Korgath?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with excitement. The Korgon warrior nodded, his expression determined. "With you, Captain, always." And with that, they blasted off into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. The sleek silver starship glided through the inky void of space, its engines humming with a steady, reassuring rhythm. Inside the cockpit, Captain Elias, Riker, and Korgath sat side by side, their eyes fixed on the holographic display before them. "Escort duty," Riker mused, a hint of disappointment in his voice. "Not exactly the most thrilling assignment, is it?" Korgath grunted, his massive hands deftly manipulating the ship's controls. "A warrior does not seek thrills, Captain. We serve where we are needed," Riker chuckled, leaning back in his seat. "Fair enough, big guy, but you've got to admit, after our last few missions, this feels a bit like a milk run." The Korgon warrior glanced at his human companion, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Perhaps, but even milk runs can hold surprises." As if on cue, the ship's comm system crackled to life. a distorted voice filling the cockpit. "Mayday! Mayday! This is the transport vessel Horizon's Edge, requesting immediate assistance." Riker and Korgath exchanged a look, their casual banter forgotten in an instant. "Horizon's Edge, this is Captain Elias Riker of the Galactic War Council. What's your situation?" The voice on the other end was panicked, the sound of explosions and alarms nearly drowning out the words. "We're under attack. Unknown assailants, heavily armed. They're trying to board us." Riker's brow furrowed, his mind racing. "Hang tight, Horizon's Edge. We're on our way." As Korgath gunned the engines, sending their ship hurtling towards a distressed vessel, Riker couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why would anyone attack a simple transport ship, he wondered aloud. Korgath shook his head, his eyes narrowing. "I do not know, Captain, but I intend to find out." As they drew closer to the Horizon's Edge, the scene that greeted them was one of chaos and destruction. The transport ship hung in space, its hull pockmarked with scorch marks and gaping holes. Smaller craft swarmed around it, their weapons flashing as they poured fire into the crippled vessel. Riker's eyes widened as he recognized the attacking ships. "Those are Korgan fighters," he breathed, disbelief coloring his voice. Korgath's grip tightened on the controls, his jaw clenching. "Impossible. The Korgan Empire is at peace with the Galactic War Council. We would never attack an unarmed transport." Riker glanced at his friend, a sinking feeling in his gut. Well, someone didn't get the memo. As they closed in on the battle, Riker opened a channel to the attacking ships. "Korgan fighters, this is Captain Elias Riker of the Galactic War Council. Stand down immediately." There was a moment of silence, then a cold, harsh voice filled the cockpit. "Captain Riker, I had hoped our paths would cross again." Riker's blood ran cold as he recognized the voice. "Krell," he whispered, memories of their last encounter flooding back. Krell had been a rising star in the Korgan military, a brilliant tactician and ruthless warrior. But he had also been a vocal opponent of peace with humanity, seeing them as weak and unworthy of the Korgan Empire's respect. When Riker had first encountered him during a tense standoff on a disputed border world, Krell had made his disdain for the human captain abundantly clear. It was only through Riker's quick thinking and diplomatic skills that bloodshed had been avoided. Now it seemed Krell had taken matters into his own hands. "What are you doing, Krell?" Riker demanded, his voice steady despite the anger boiling within him. "Attacking an unarmed transport is a violation of every treaty and convention we have." Krell's laughter was cold and mocking. "Treaties and conventions are for the weak, Captain. The Korgan Empire deserves better than to be shackled by the whims of lesser species." Korgath's eyes widened, a growl building in his throat. "You speak treason, Krell. The Emperor himself has decreed that we are to be at peace with humanity." "The Emperor is a fool!" Krell spat, his voice dripping with venom. "He has allowed himself to be swayed by the words of a human, a creature barely worthy of scraping the mud from our boots." Riker's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening. "Krell, listen to me. What you're doing here, it could lead to war. Countless lives will be lost, on both sides." "And what of it?" Krell sneered. "War is the crucible in which the strong are forged, Captain. It is through conflict that the Korgan Empire has always risen to greatness." Korgath shook his head, his voice heavy with sorrow. "No, Krell. War is a beast that consumes all in its path, leaving nothing but ashes and regret in its wake. I have seen the truth of this through the eyes of my human brother." Krell's laughter was harsh and mocking. "Your human brother? You are a disgrace to your people, Korgath. A true Korgan warrior would never lower himself to such depths." Riker's eyes flashed with anger, his voice cold as ice. "That's enough, Krell. Stand down or we will be forced to take action." "You are welcome to try, Captain," Krell hissed. "But know this, the Horizon's Edge is only the beginning. Soon the galaxy will tremble before the might of the true Korgan Empire, and your precious peace will be nothing but a memory." With that, the channel went dead, leaving Riker and Korgath alone in the cockpit, the weight of Krell's words hanging heavy in the air. "We have to stop him," Riker said, his voice grim. "If Krell is allowed to continue, he could plunge the entire galaxy into war." Korgath nodded, his eyes hard as flint. "Agreed, Captain, but we cannot do it alone. We will need allies and proof of Krell's treachery." Riker's mind raced, a plan forming even as he spoke. "The Horizon's Edge. If we can board her, We might be able to find evidence of what Krell is planning." Korgath grinned, a fierce light in his eyes. "Then let us waste no time, Captain. We have a ship to save and a traitor to unmask." As they gunned the engines and dove into the fray, Riker couldn't help but feel a sense of grim determination. Krell's betrayal cut deep, a painful reminder of the fragility of the peace they had worked so hard to build. But with Korgath at his side, he knew that they would stop at nothing to expose the truth and bring the rogue Korgan to justice. For the sake of the galaxy and for the bond of brotherhood that had grown between them, they would fight to the bitter end. And as the first volleys of weapons fire lit up the void, Riker allowed himself a small, fierce smile. Krell may have had the element of surprise, but he had no idea what he was up against. For when a human and a Korgan stood together, united by the bonds of friendship and trust, there was no force in the universe that could stand against them. The corridors of the horizon's edge were a maze of twisted metal and flickering lights, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning circuitry. Captain Elias Riker and Korgath moved through the chaos with grim determination, their weapons at the ready as they navigated the crippled transport ship. "We need to find the ship's data core," Riker said, his voice tense. "If Krell is planning something bigger, there might be clues hidden in the horizon's edge's records." Korgath nodded, his massive frame filling the narrow passageway. "Agreed, Captain, but we must be cautious. Krell's warriors are not to be underestimated." As if on cue, a burst of weapons fire erupted from the shadows ahead, forcing the duo to take cover behind a shattered bulkhead. Riker risked a glance around the edge, his eyes narrowing as he spotted a group of Korgan soldiers advancing on their position. "Looks like Krell's been busy," he muttered, ducking back as another volley of energy bolts sizzled past. "Those aren't just any Korgan warriors. They're wearing the colors of the Imperial Guard." Korgath's eyes widened, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. "The Imperial Guard? But they answered directly to the Emperor himself. They would never betray their oaths." Riker's jaw tightened, a sinking feeling in his gut. "Unless Krell's influence goes higher than we thought, we need to get to that data core now more than ever." With a nod of agreement, Korgath hefted his massive battle axe, the weapon humming with barely contained energy. "Leave these traitors to me, Captain. I will clear a path." Before Riker could protest, the Korgan warrior let out a roar of challenge and charged forward, his axe cleaving through the air with terrifying speed. The Imperial Guard soldiers barely had time to react before Korgath was upon them, his weapon a blur of motion as he tore through their ranks like a force of nature. Riker was close behind, his own blaster spitting fire as he picked off the stragglers. Together they fought their way through the ship, leaving a trail of broken bodies and shattered equipment in their wake. Finally, they reached the horizon's edge's data core, a massive chamber filled with pulsing lights and humming machinery. Riker hurried to the central console, his fingers flying over the controls as he worked to access the ship's records. "I'm in," he said, his eyes scanning the information scrolling across the screen. "Let's see what Krell's been up to." As he delved deeper into the data, Riker's eyes widened, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. "By the stars," he whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "Korgath, you need to see this." The Korgan warrior leaned in, his own expression darkening as he read the words on the screen. A secret peace summit between human and Korgan leaders, set to take place on the neutral world of Ether Prime. Riker nodded, his mind racing. "And look at the date. It's happening right now. Krell's attack on the horizon's edge. It was just a diversion, a way to draw us away from his real target." Korgath's fists clenched, a low growl building in his throat. The summit. If Krell succeeds in disrupting the talks, it could undo everything we've worked for. The peace between our peoples would be shattered, Riker finished, his voice grim. And war would be inevitable. For a moment, the two warriors stood in silence, the weight of their discovery hanging heavy in the air. Then Riker's eyes hardened, a fierce determination taking hold. "We have to stop him, Korgath, no matter the cost." The Korgan nodded, his own resolve unwavering. "Agreed, Captain, but we cannot do it alone. Krell's treachery runs deep and his allies are many. We will need to be clever and strike from within." Riker's brow furrowed, a plan taking shape in his mind. "You're right, we need to split up. I'll take the ship and race to Ether Prime. Try to warn the summit leaders. You stay here and work to unravel Krell's network of spies and saboteurs." Korgath hesitated, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Captain, are you certain? Ether Prime will be heavily guarded, and if Krell discovers your presence..." Riker clasped his friend's shoulder, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "Hey, have a little faith, big guy. I may not be a Korgan warrior, but I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. Besides, someone's got to keep those stuffy diplomats from starting a war." Korgath chuckled, a rare moment of levity in the midst of the chaos. "Very well, Captain, but promise me this. If you find yourself in trouble, do not hesitate to call for aid. I will come no matter the distance or the danger." Riker nodded, his eyes shining with gratitude. "I know you will, Korgath, and I promise. I'll be careful. But you watch your back too, you hear? Krell's not going to take kindly to you poking around at his operation." The Korgan warrior grinned, a fierce light in his eyes. "Let him try to stop me, Captain. I will show him the true meaning of Korgan honor and the strength of the bond we share." With a final clasp of hands, the two warriors parted ways, each setting out on their own perilous mission. Riker raced to the ship's hangar bay, his heart pounding as he prepared to make the jump to Ether Prime. He knew that the odds were stacked against him, that Krell's forces would be waiting, ready to strike at the first sign of trouble. But he also knew that he carried with him the hopes and dreams of two peoples, the fragile promise of a future free from the endless cycle of war and hatred, and for that he would risk everything, even his own life. As the stars blurred into the swirling vortex of hyperspace, Riker allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought of Korgath, his brother in arms, facing his own trials and dangers. He thought of the brave men and women who had fought and died to bring them to this moment, the sacrifices that had been made in the name of peace, and he knew with a certainty that burned in his very soul that he would not let them down. For the sake of the galaxy, for the bond of friendship that had grown between him and Korgath, he would fight to his last breath. And as the ship hurtled towards its destination, Riker let out a fierce, defiant cry, a promise to the universe itself. "Hold on, Ether Prime. Help is on the way." The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, the once peaceful planet of Ether Prime, now a chaotic battleground. Captain Elias Riker's heart raced as he surveyed the scene before him. Korgan and human ships locked in a desperate struggle for control. "No," he whispered, his voice tinged with despair. "We're too late." But even as the words left his lips, Riker felt a surge of determination. He had not come this far, fought so hard to let Krell's treachery tear the galaxy apart. With a fierce cry, he gunned the engines and dove into the fray. "Hold on tight," he called over the comm. "We're going in hot!" The ship weaved and dodged through the crossfire, Riker's hands flying over the controls as he pushed the vessel to its limits. Explosions rocked the hull, alarms blaring in the cockpit, but he refused to yield. As they approached the summit site, Riker's eyes widened in horror. The once majestic halls lay in ruins, bodies strewn across the rubble. And there, amid the carnage, stood Krell, his eyes alight with mad triumph. "Ah, Captain Riker," the rogue Korgan sneered, "come to witness the birth of a new era?" Riker leapt from the ship, his blaster drawn. "The only thing I'm here to witness, Krell, is your downfall." Krell laughed, a harsh grating sound. "You still don't understand, do you? This is bigger than you, bigger than me. The galaxy is on the brink of a new age, an age of Korgan supremacy." With a roar, Krell charged, his battle axe flashing. Riker met him head-on, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. "You're wrong, Krell," Riker grunted, parrying a blow. "The galaxy doesn't need supremacy. It needs unity, compassion, understanding." "Compassion?" Krell spat. "Understanding? Weaknesses, all of them. The Korgan Empire will rise again, and I will be the one to lead it." They fought back and forth, trading blows and taunts, their battle raging across the ruined landscape. Krell was strong, skilled, but Riker had something the rogue Korgan could never understand. The power of friendship, the bond he shared with Korgath. "Where's your Korgan pet now, Riker?" Krell taunted. "Has he abandoned you like the coward he is?" Riker's eyes flashed with anger. "Korgath is no coward, and he is no pet. He is my brother, in arms and in spirit, and he will never abandon me, just as I will never abandon him." Just then, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield. Riker and Krell turned, their eyes widening as a fleet of Korgan ships dropped out of hyperspace, weapons blazing. At the head of the fleet, a familiar figure stood tall, his battle axe raised high. Korgath had done it. He had exposed Krell's treachery, rallied the loyal Korgan warriors, and arrived in the nick of time. "Impossible," Krell whispered, his face pale with disbelief. Riker grinned, a fierce joy surging through him. "You underestimated him, Krell. You underestimated us both." With a cry of triumph, Riker launched himself at Krell, his blaster flashing. The rogue Korgan staggered back, his eyes wide with fear and disbelief. And then, in a blur of motion, Korgath was there, his axe flashing out in a single, clean stroke. Krell's head tumbled from his shoulders, his body crumpling to the ground. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the distant sounds of battle. Then, as one, the Korgan and human forces lowered their weapons, a stunned realization dawning on their faces. Riker turned to Korgath, his eyes shining with gratitude and affection. "You did it, big guy. You saved us all." Korgath clasped Riker's arm, his grip firm and strong. "No, Captain, we did it together, as brothers, as friends." A cheer began to rise from the assembled warriors, growing in volume and intensity until it was a deafening roar of triumph and celebration. In the days that followed, the story of their heroism spread like wildfire. The tale of the human captain who had shown mercy to his greatest foe, who had forged an unbreakable bond with a Korgan warrior, became a legend, a shining example of the power of compassion and unity. And as the galaxy began to rebuild, Riker and Korgath found themselves at the forefront of a new era of peace and cooperation. They became the ambassadors of their peoples, the living embodiment of the ideals they had fought so hard to protect. There were challenges, of course. Old grudges and prejudices did not disappear overnight. But with each passing day, with each act of kindness and understanding, the galaxy grew a little brighter, a little more hopeful. And through it all, Riker and Korgath remained side by side, their bond unbreakable, their friendship a shining beacon of light in the darkness. "You know," Riker said one day, as they stood together on the bridge of their ship, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad I met you, Korgath. I'm glad we became friends." Korgath chuckled, a deep rumbling sound. "As am I, Captain, as am I, though I must admit, I never thought I would call a human my brother." Riker grinned, clapping the Korgan on the shoulder. "Well, get used to it, big guy, because you're stuck with me now, for better or worse." "I would have it no other way," Korgath replied, his eyes shining with warmth and affection. And so, as the stars wheeled overhead and the galaxy sang with newfound joy and hope, Captain Elias, Riker, and Korgath stood tall and proud, their hearts full of gratitude and wonder, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Together, they had fought the good fight, and in doing so, they had changed the course of history forever. And though the road ahead would be long and difficult, they knew that as long as they had each other, as long as the flame of friendship and compassion burned bright within their hearts, there was nothing they could not overcome. For in the end, that was the true miracle of their story, the real magic that had saved the galaxy from the brink of destruction. Not the strength of their weapons or the cunning of their tactics, but the simple, powerful truth that had guided them from the very beginning. That in a universe of darkness and despair, the light of love and friendship would always find a way to shine through, to guide the lost and weary home, and to remind us all of the boundless potential that lies within the human heart. And as Riker and Korgath set out on their next adventure, their eyes bright with the promise of new horizons and untold wonders, they knew that they carried with them the hopes and dreams of an entire galaxy, the shining legacy of all those who had fought and sacrificed to make this moment possible. "Ready to save the galaxy again, Korgath?" Riker asked, a mischievous glint in his eye. The Korgan warrior grinned, his battle axe slung over his shoulder. "With you, Captain, always." Hand in hand, heart to heart, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that together they could overcome anything and that the galaxy would never be the same again.